welcome to my channel and my gallery in southwest France. Today we're going to be exploring the use of watercolours to create an atmosphere. In the summer, in one lovely balmy evening, I took a photograph of the old courtyard here. It's inspired me to try to capture that same atmosphere of lovely balmy evening, the blues and the browns of the courtyard, and we're going to start right from the beginning with this picture, exploring different watercolour techniques, some of which I've not covered before. It's going to be an exciting adventure, so I hope you'll join me and let's paint. So I've printed my photograph on photographic paper to give me the best quality of colour and definition. And I also have paper on the board. I've stretched the paper, but I've also done some very basic drawing, just the opening of the doorway and the furniture that you see in the foreground. This is very much a picture of contrast with the light source from the doorway and that lovely warm feeling of a hot evening where you can sit outside for ages and watch the stars. I have my palettes organised, burnt sienna, Indian red, transparent yellow and transparent orange. The bottom palette, which consists of transparent yellow, Windsor blue, green shade. And now I'm thinking about how to start this picture. I need to just look at the distribution of colour. So in actual fact, I'm going to start by turning the image upside down and painting. And also I'll turn the board with the stretched paper on upside down. So I'm actually painting everything in the reverse. This means that I don't see the detail, I just see the distribution of colour, which is the important thing here. And I'm going to start with my blue palette with a combination of ultramarine blue, Payne's grey and Windsor blue red shade. I'm not going to wet the paper first. The paint is going to apply very strongly in the areas where I see the darkest shading without water added to the paper first. And you can see I'm starting in the left-hand corner there with my mix of Payne's grey and Windsor blue red shade. Applying it very generously with a large mop brush, size 10 mop brush, on the paper, which is the usual Arches 300 gram watercolour paper, 100% cotton. Sorry about my head getting in the way. Painting like this, it's a very spontaneous thing and I tend to forget that the camera's there. I hope it doesn't interfere too much with your vision and enjoyment of the picture and the techniques I'm using. This painting upside down process is something that I always use when I have a complicated image, and it helps me to see the distribution of colour without getting bogged down in the detail. I'm working the paint slowly up the paper as you see, and spotting in extra colour where needed. So I'm actually working with a puddle of colour all the time. And I can take it right down to the point where I have the pencil sketch of the outdoor furniture. And once I've laid the colour down, I don't go back into it. I don't want to create a bloom. Head in the way again. Sorry. Must work on my camera skills more. I'm adding water now to this area. This is the area where the light source is, and Yellow is the colour that will help us to maintain that luminous effect. So I'm just adding yellow to the mix and just cautiously letting the water combine the two colours, and a little bit of green as well, just to start to give the impression of the wisteria which overhangs the light source. Love painting like this. It's just so unexpected and wonderful to do, and the effects you can create are very dramatic and pleasing. This subject lends itself totally to this spontaneous approach. I'm going into my brown palette now with the burnt sienna and Indian red, but making sure that I water the edge of the line so it doesn't set into a harsh line. I'm going right down to the foot of the page, you see, because of course we're painting upside down, so the top is the bottom, and keeping it nice and fluid now. This area of the picture is lighter, but I want that combination of the blues and the browns as you see in the image. It's all speeded up drastically. I hope not too much for you, but to get all the information in, I don't want the video to be too long. And so if it is, well, tell me in your comments. I always appreciate your comments. There is a green area in this area, so I've just wet this part of the paint of the paper before I've added the colour, and this will automatically dilute the colour more, and there's nothing wrong with spotting some colour in and moving it. The browns and the greens can combine. This is a very loose basis for what we want ultimately, and I'm just using as my guide the photograph upside down, so I just get the distribution of colour. And in a moment I'm going to turn it round so I can compare with the picture also turned round to see whether we've achieved the right effect, the right distribution of colour. Sometimes it comes as a great surprise as to how well it's worked. Other times it can be a bit of a disappointment. But yes, I think we've got there. We've got our dark area at the top, got a lovely combination of the blues, and down below it's very diffused and combined with the browns and the blues and the greens. And of course I've left the open doorway and the light source without paint, and that's for the future. And now I can start to use my small brush to spot in some greens in the area where the wisteria is hanging a bit above the light to diffuse it. And because now the paper is wet, the green will spread and diffuse into the blues, and it will create some blooms. Which is what we want, really, a very loose, and the contrast. This picture is all about contrast. The light coming from the open doorway, the wet light, the wet and blue effect that we've got at the top of the picture is helping us to add the green and it to spread into the colour. So working wet on wet is a good way to deal with this particular part of the image. Coming down over the open door, because there's quite a lot of shading and leaves hanging over the open doorway, which opens outwards into the courtyard. There's a little area on the left which has started to dry quicker than the rest, and so I'm going to add more Payne's grey mix into that space. I don't want a tide line developing, and I want that area to stay really dark. Don't want to lose the blue, the ultramarine though, at the top of the picture. And now I'm using my yellow acrylic brush, my De La Rowney System 3, I think it is, brush, just to take out some colour. The Payne's Grey moves very easily, and I can wet it and dab it off with a wet tissue because I want more light in this part of the picture. It's coming off quite easily, quite in a satisfying way really. Wet it, dab it, and off it comes. I'm looking at this area here where the garden furniture is, and now I'm going to use masking fluid. I didn't want to use the masking fluid earlier. I wanted to put some colour on first. But I'm using my liner brush, quite a good liner brush, but I'm protecting it with washing up liquid. I've just smeared that onto the brush because the masking fluid is a rubber solution and can destroy a brush if it's not protected with the washing up liquid, the soap, the liquid soap. Now I can apply very carefully the masking fluid to the areas of the garden furniture which are catching the light. I don't want to do too much here because I'll define the garden furniture later on. But the fact that I'm using a good brush, protecting it with the soap, means that I can get some really sharp lines. Quite a few artists use an old brush to apply the masking fluid, but it tends not to give you a fine line. And once the brush is washed, the brush will be okay and protected. I carried on doing the rest without videoing it because it can be a bit tedious, but now you see there are lines in the bottom part of the picture which define the furniture. And I've gone back to adding more greens to my area which is now dry, where I took out the blues. This is to create the effect, the contrast. It's all about contrast, this picture, about light and shade, light and dark in effect. And going in with strong colour on dry paper produces the darkest effect that you can produce with watercolours. Just spotting in the greens. Again, this is speeded up. I don't work that fast. Impossible, really. Now moving across to the shady area over the door where I need some blue contrast, and I've got my dark blues again, which I'm now putting between the areas of green and the lighter areas that I created earlier on with the yellow brush, with the acrylic brush. My palette here of burnt sienna and Indian red is now coming into its own because I want to add colour on the door. Because this is a vertical object, I apply the paint vertically, and this is the first coat obviously, but I'm applying it vertically and washing over the leaves. Sorry about the head again, must try harder. Coming down like that. Hope you can see it okay, even so. Now, the lovely combination of the cold colours and the warmth of the door help to reinforce that contrast, which is the essence of the picture, really. And looking at the palette now, I'm going back to the contrast, adding more dark colour between my leaves and in the areas where I want the impact of the shade and the light. The door is dry now, so I can go back in with more definition of the leaves. Just this little liner brush is the same one that I used to apply the masking fluid, but it's survived very well. It's not at all gummed up with the rubber solution and is working fine, helping me to get the definition of the leaves using the green palette and for the shade the blue palette. Now I have a large planter at the foot of the doorway, as you see, and the leaves that I initially put there, I have added a few more, and now I'm adding the contrast in this area too, between the leaves, really painting in the negative because the shading emphasizes the leaves that are there. But I want to continue to add more shading. You see in the photograph how dark and shady this part of the picture is. The light source projects light into the courtyard, but the rest is very much in the shade, in the darkness. So the colour has to be strong to create this contrast. And the colours I'm using are a combination of blues and greens at this stage. I'm wetting this area first now. This area, as you see in the image, is very dark. And I can spot some colour in, spot some blues and let them move a little. If you try this, be adventurous with the colour. Don't just stick with one blue. Let them combine on the paper. Have fun with it. Spot the colour in and then just add water so it can flow across. Because I've protected the highlights of the garden furniture, I can just forget about them now and take the shading right across. From underneath the leaves of the plant, underneath the tabletop. Now I've got the scope to add more colour in a more random way, which I love to do. Let it move a little. Move it a little bit more with the brush. So now all this area is wet. I can add little details and it will just blend in with the colours that I have there already. More colour going in now. This isn't ultramarine, this is Windsor Blue Red shade, and I just feel I need that connection with the blue at the top of the picture to give it that all over consistency. I don't want that line there, so I've just wet that area and just dabbing it with tissue just so that it doesn't form an absolute line. I'm leaving the bottom of the picture now to dry. I'm going to reinforce shadows behind the doorway. This is on dry paper now because I want that intensity of colour again, which can only be achieved if you apply strong colour to wet paper. There's a definition of the end of the wall there, so another vertical, which I did in pencil at the start. And now I'm working up a little bit lighter colour, taking it up into the part of the picture which is more shady. Spot the colour in to keep that depth of colour and let it move a little. Okay, now we don't really want that harsh line, so we're going to go in with water along the edge of it and then take some colour across, because there are shadows coming down the wall which I want to create dark shadows which come across. Part of that wall is lit by the light from the doorway, but part is still in the shadows created by the wisteria. Quite a dramatic picture, really. It just takes me back to that lovely evening when it was so warm and lovely to sit out there. Another green area at the bottom. Because this is all wet now, it gives me a chance to spot some colour in this area. And take it right down, further down to the top of the table, which is becoming more evident now because we've applied colour all round it. My last area for attention is the wall by the side of the doorway, and it's the surface of the house is very rough and very old, and so I'm using a combination of burnt sienna and Windsor blue green shade, which will kind of give me a dirty green, and I'm putting it on vertically and then washing it down the way with a dry brush because I want it to be streaky and textured. And I've put a brush, my big brush, underneath the end of the board just to tilt it a little so the colour doesn't completely swamp that area. I want the light bit at the top, but I want it to be dark and uneven at the bottom. So I can just let it flow and dry brush work, just letting it move the colour over the surface of the paper will help. And then I can integrate it into the plant, which is very handy there to kind of give me that contrast. So all the dark areas now have colour on them, and we can really see the light bursting out from the doorway. The door does require some more detail and a little bit more depth of colour. So I'm now going in with the Indian red, again vertically but not all over, just to give that impression of the old door and the texture that it has, and the shadows that are going across it. A little bit more dry brush work. Emphasizing the shadows, like going across. Just move it a little. I'm having great fun with this picture. I enjoy doing it. And now I'm taking off the masking fluid. Just with my fingers, just rubbing gently. Don't need to use a rubber or a razor, just rub it gently, it'll come off without any bother. And this will give me the scope then to go in with the brush and just do the vague outlines of the furniture, but I'm not going to do it extensively. You see what I've done here, just reinforced the protected areas and just really given an indication that the furniture is there. Now finally, I'm going to do a little bit more detail on the door, the bolt that crosses it, and some of the panels of the door which are defined. I'm not going too much into detail with that because I think it's time to say, okay, this is my atmospheric courtyard, created with so many different watercolour techniques. I hope you enjoyed it. I did, I certainly did. Thank you. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it and it's inspired you to cover and try some of the techniques that we've used in the creation of this painting. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and leave any comments you may have. In future videos, I hope to cover in more depth some of the techniques we've used today, especially painting upside down, which is a fascinating way of analysing the distribution of colour in a picture and making it easier to make those first steps to painting a loose and beautiful picture. So for now, happy painting. Bye.